all in all, we've got the engineering resource. We were able to solve the problem. We've generated an engine for our business moving forward. We've all really enjoyed the path. So it's a success all the way around.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Paul Lloyd, president of Farrel Pomini. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
No, thank you so much for coming on. It's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Okay, we make large capital equipment mixing machines for mixing and compounding plastics. The reason we make that is so that plastics can be used in everyday life. So medical devices, construction, automotive, everybody comes in contact with plastics every day. We make the plastics in a form that they're usable for you.
So making an impact on everyday life.
I'm hoping so.
That's the goal. Well, listen, we've got a lot to talk about, right? I mean, Farrel Pomini's got 175 plus years of history to kind of get through. You haven't been there for all of it.
Not quite all of it.
But you've been there for a good amount, almost 4 decades. So definitely want to kind of go through the background. And I think, one of the stuff that we talked about sort of pre-show, which I really want to get into, is just sort of the view you guys have of plastics and plastics in the world, which I think is a really important point. There's, based on our conversations, there's some misunderstandings, I think, of what the role plastics can play and sort of what they do. So I want to get into some of that and sustainability, talk about sort of the participation in the Connecticut manufacturing ecosystem. I know you guys have really leaned into sort of partnerships and growth. I think that's an important story that we can certainly tell, as well as sort of the team and what you guys do from an engineering perspective. But let's just sort of start with your story, Paul. Like, how did you get involved in Farrel Pomini? And kind of where is your passion for what you do come from?
Well, again, it is indicative, I think, of also what we hope will be the future. So I started at Farrel in 1989. So it's 34 years ago at a daughter company to Farrel Corporation, the company I work at today. I came into that company in a program that doesn't exist in the US, where they take people before they go to college. They marry them together with the education and the working environment. So all of my education was sponsored by Farrel. All of the work I did was sponsored by Farrel, and I received training simultaneous. So while I was in school and college, I was learning. When I wasn't in school or college, I was working inside of the company.
Almost like a work-study apprenticeship combo program?
It was like it was a full apprenticeship combo program, but it was fully employed by the company. I was paid by the company. The education was paid by the company. And when I wasn't in school, I was working. What it meant was by the time I finished the education, not only did I have the education I needed to go forward and be useful to the company, I had 8 or 10 years of experience of working inside the company, which then allows me to progress quicker and move forward. It was a fantastic program. I was also very fortunate that I worked with a sequence of people who were very interested in seeing people progress. Something which I try and keep now, and I think we'll speak about the engineering development program later on, which is where the origins of this are, which means making it easy for people to progress, making sure they're never pulled back. And from there, I moved through a sequence of roles in a very interesting company that supplies products all over the world to lots of different industries, not just plastics. Also, if you drive a car, you've got tires on your car. If you've got tires on your car, they were probably made on a Farrel machine or a copy of a Farrel machine somewhere. So lots of interface with very interesting products, very interesting customers, and very interesting places. And
is that right? Wait, just to go back to something you just said, almost every tire in the world is made either on a Farrel machine or a copy of that?
I would probably say every tire in the world is made on a Farrel machine or a copy of it. And again, even today, Farrel and our parent company, HF Mixing Group, still supply around about 55% of the machines which mix the rubber compounds before they're made into tires. We don't do that so much in Ansonia anymore. We've concentrated on the plastics industry, but our group still does that work. And it used to be done down in Ansonia, Connecticut. So they would service all of the U.S. tire market, Goodyear, Cooper, and all of the others, all buy machines from Farrel.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's true.
Look at that. That's I guess when you got 175 years under your belt, lots of stuff gets done.
Well, we do lots of stuff. And again, we've done a wide range of products right from the beginning. It was originally a foundry set up by the Naugatuck River to use the water from the river, making brass and bronze castings, into general engineering. Then we've made everything over those 148 years. We've just had our 175-year event. We made a big deal, upsetting one or two of our southern customers, but we Farrel's made bayonets for the Yankees in the Civil War. We've made gearboxes for ships that were used in World War II. We've made gearboxes for ships, gearboxes for other devices which are used everywhere. We've made stone crushing machines. We've made aluminium presses. We've made machines for cutting railway wheels. We've made the full gambit. In the end, we found polymer processing was our niche, and that's where we kind of divested some of the businesses in the late 80s, and since early 1990s, we've been focusing on the rubber and plastics industries.
So rubber and plastics were sort of part of the company before, but realizing at some point in the 1980s that this was the niche to ride for the next iteration.
Yes, and that's it. I mean, again, back there in the 80s, Farrel, I mean, now we employ around about 100 people. Back then in the 80s, there was around about 2,500 people employed by Farrel in North America. Over 1,200 of them were employed in the Ansonia area. And like many companies back then, they made a wide range of products that were going into different markets. It was very diverse. It wasn't really a market where you were specializing in your product. It was, can you supply it? Yes, there's a demand. We can do it. Over time, the company had to become leaner. There was a change in manufacturing, particularly in the US at the time, cost and products coming from elsewhere. They had to specialize, center down on the things which added the most value. And that's where they kind of divested one or two areas, concentrated where they had the most value, and put all of their resources into those products.
And it sounds like you were actually part of that, right? Because you joined in the late 80s, so you were involved at least at some point in that focus, even if the decisions were already made.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think back then I was feeling the force of some of those decisions. At that
You
point,
weren't making them back then?
but I was feeling the effect of them. And it's true. I mean, back then in the late 80s, early 90s, every year we'd be told how many people would be leaving the business. And this was the focus, that the manufacturing businesses were getting smaller. They were cutting costs, both in the UK and in the US. It was things were becoming more efficient. Computers were being used more. I mean, again, it's an interesting parallel to what's happening today with AI. But the business was generally getting smaller and smaller, and now it's quite nice for me to go through the transition in manufacturing, to see it go from a contraction to being an expansion. Now our problems are related to growth, getting the right people, getting the right resources we need. And it's quite a nice transition for me, for sure.
Yeah, I bet. So this is a bit of a pivot, and not so much on Farrel specifically, but just you brought up a topic that I find somewhat interesting. Looking back on having lived through all that transition, how do you think about it? Like, obviously a necessary transition, you think? I mean, the way it was being done before, just unsustainable go forward?
Yeah, I think it was. And I think it's easy to look back at some of the decisions that were made then and see them with a bitter light, or see them not as a positive thing. But the ultimate point is Farrel Pomini is there today. It's 175 years old. The challenges of the day were the challenges of the day. And the main job was to navigate those challenges and make sure that the company was there to continue and grow. That was done successfully because we're still here now. So I don't think it was a pleasant experience, but not all things that are good for you are pleasant. And I think that's probably what happened. And again, it's easy to look back and say you would do things differently. Hindsight's fantastic.
Sure, yeah.
You guys talk about Monday morning quarterback and things, but it's, for me, I think your only conclusion can be the company survived, the company is strong now, and this goes back to that period and before it. That was our foundation. That's what we're building on. So I think you've got to look back on it with a certain degree of saying it was successful.
So as we sort of made those decisions to really focus on rubber and plastics, talk sort of a little bit about that transition or what that focus really led to. Like, what was it about those markets that were so good, and how has that sort of supported the stability of the organization? Because here we are, almost 40 plus years later, anyway, around that 40-year mark, and as you mentioned, it's been successful.
Yeah, I think again the people who made those really difficult decisions were quite smart. It's very difficult, I think, in business to make emotional decisions. To be able to see past an emotion, something you've always done, onto something which offers you a bright future is difficult. And I think many companies face that today as well. They made a very nice job of that. If they were still making aluminium presses instead of rubber and plastics mixing machines, our business wouldn't be as strong today as it was back then. If we were making machines for cutting railway wheels, maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. We don't know. But what they did, they focused on products where they thought they had a market-leading, which means globally market-leading product that they could build as a foundation, and then they focused on making those products better and servicing the markets. And it turned out to be a good strategy. It allowed focus. That's when we concentrated further down the line to change from a rubber and plastics company to a plastics company. It was focus that drove that decision as well. And it's been very successful for us again. So I think the decisions were made about competitiveness, the quality of the product. And again, as I mentioned before, Farrel's products, the rubber mixing machines are used in every rubber mixing market in the world. It's a very successful product, and again, the foresight that those people had was obviously correct.
And so when you decided to go into sort of the work study or the apprenticeship program that you talked about, why did you decide to get into manufacturing at the time? And I don't know what the other options you had in front of you at the time were, but
it was a great question. I was currently working in a shoe factory, signed up to go to college with a intent to become and go and work in a bank. So I wanted to work in finance.
You were getting out. Enough of these shoes.
Yeah, that's it. So it was a summer job to wait until I went to college in the autumn. And my father brought home a newspaper and said, "Here's an engineering company that's looking for somebody to join them." And I think there was two things that motivated him to cut out that advert and pass it to me. One was he understood, somewhat incorrectly, that back then most of the engineers in the UK were going to Saudi Arabia and places like that and earning a lot of money, and he assumed that's what everyone would do. The second thing is he realized it would get me off the payroll in terms of going to college. So that was what he pushed me to do. It turned out it was a good decision. I wouldn't say I was passionate about it immediately. I did the thing that you do. So your father tells you to go do something. So I went and did it. I discussed it, had a look around, thought maybe there's more to this than I believed, was successful in the application. There was a lot of people applied for those kind of positions. And it went from there. It got inside the company. Then I grew up inside that business and making things, building things. It's very rewarding. I mean, it's very, very tangible. And from there, all the way through my career, I've managed to find one challenge after another. Started working to being an engineer, working with the product, then I wanted to go in a different direction, become more commercial, then into management, but always, wherever it was, managed to find the right challenge to get me going. And I think that's what I would say to people now in manufacturing, particularly if you look at a company like Farrel Pomini. We create things, we design things, we build them, we service them. There's a full spectrum of work that we do. If you can't find something that you enjoy across that spectrum, it's difficult to believe. And I think most people, once they get involved in that, can find a niche which is good for them. They can see constructively what they're doing, and they can get involved. And I think most people tend to like it.
Yeah, look, I fully connect with that. And there's another piece there that I just wanted to highlight, which is something that, talking to people, my kids actually, we started a little bit later, but I got friends who have kids that are looking at college and whatnot. And there's always feels like this pressure to make sure you got to love the thing before you start. We've all been hearing, find something you love, do something you're passionate about. And you just said something that said you weren't instantly passionate about it. You sort of mentioned the old school, and it's hard to put myself in that feeling, but that is where I'm at, which was like this idea of like, why did I do something? Because my dad said, go do it. And so I got to go do it. And hopefully I find out that I like it. And it sort of seems like you ended up finding a passion inside of something.
Yeah, I did. And again, as I mentioned before, I was quite fortunate when I went through my career that I was in a system that was enabled to build people. The whole idea of the system was to educate people, to train people, to make them better, and to ultimately to make them useful to the company. But those are shared benefits. But because of that, I was able to move through different areas in the company, to see different things. Some things I liked, some things I didn't, but I had the freedom to find the path I wanted to take and pursue it. And I wouldn't recommend to many people that you just do what your father says. You should be respectful, but I think I would recommend that you find something that you like and that you pursue it. I don't think it's a good idea to be pressurized to feel like you need to do that right now. So your path will become clear as you move forward, as long as you remain curious, as long as you look for those things, you'll find the right place. You'll find your niche. Mine, where it ended up, wasn't what I believed it would be in the first place, but it's worked very well for me.
Yeah, there's that. I think the thing about listening to your parents sometimes is like sometimes they just push you to get off the block.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that sort of, whether you call it failure to launch or sort of get stuck navel gazing or analysis paralysis, I think so many people get stuck trying to find the perfect thing. They don't just move forward. And whether you had determined that this was the path or not, you would have been moving forward and you could have moved to something else. But had you just kept thinking just like not getting something going, just moving forward matters.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. And also understanding the experience of other people. I'm fairly sure now if I took the career path I first envisaged for myself, I would be bored. I wouldn't have enjoyed it. It would have led to a change at some point. I can't look back now and see myself being in the right place if I'd gone down the path I originally went down. That's not to say somebody else wouldn't. I'm sure they would, but for me, it would not have worked. This worked. Fortune or whatever it was that pushed me in that direction. It was definitely a good decision.
Yeah, amen to that. So it's great. So you found something that you loved. You've been working at it for some time, and so let's sort of talk about a little bit around the plastics and the sustainability. Yep. Look, because plastics has become a dirty word. We've come a long way from the 1960s. When son, the plastics is the future. We've come to a different place of banning plastic bags. You can't go a week without seeing some poor dolphin stuck in a plastic net or whatever. How do you think about sort of that reality or the way that that's being portrayed versus what you guys are doing?
I think what you have to remember, and again, what we always point towards is to make sure that you evaluate everything that you see. There's no doubt that plastics have a role to play in the future, but there's also no doubt plastics can be a significant problem for the planet, for humankind. Nobody, I think, anywhere through the industry believes that the cycle of make, dispose, go to waste is the correct cycle. Now, with plastics, it was an easy one to do. Plastics are very, very successful because they help in a lot of other design decisions. So if you want extra mileage from your car or to save fuel, save burning additional gas, how do you do that? You lightweight the car. How do you lightweight the car? Use plastics instead of metals. Okay. That's quite old now as we transition to EVs. But again, what affects the range of an EV? The weight of an EV.
Absolutely.
You still need plastics there. So I think the key thing is to work out where plastics can be beneficial and use them. And for 40 years, almost every design decision that included plastics, the result of that was to choose plastics as the material you would use for whatever it was you wanted to produce. Okay. We didn't fully understand the fact that you need a method for collecting plastics, reusing plastics, and working with them again. This is something between there and taking some carbon out of the world. Obviously, plastics come from oil, and then we've got to find different solutions to that. But I think it's very important to view plastics. Plastics are very recyclable. Plastics can be used again. Plastics are an efficient resource to manufacture with. They're an efficient resource to use. We need to close the loop and we need to innovate. This is where bans become very difficult, in my opinion. If you ban something, the innovation stops. the plastics industry has been innovating since the 1960s. Now the problem is fully known and fully understood. We need a little bit of time to look at that and to work it through and to come up with solutions. Nobody disagrees that making something of plastic once, using it, throwing away, not having anywhere for it to go is a good idea. I mean, nobody has a problem with that. But I think before we throw all of the good away with the bad, it's important to evaluate these things. And most importantly of all is to make sure people understand the requirements and what we need as humanity, as people. We have to use the resources of our planet better. We have to make sure they can be used to satisfy consumers, to satisfy what we need to build, and we've got to find a way to capture those and use them again. The plastics industry is doing that very well. It's very lucrative at this moment in time for Farrel Pomini. We run trials of producing different materials down in our laboratory in Ansonia. And right now, 7 of every 10 trials we run is based around recycling or a bioproduct, which means a plastic that isn't made from carbon. So these are potentially, you can get both of the benefits. You can get the benefit of the engineering solution of using a plastic, and you can get the benefit of sustainability, being able to reuse, being able to reduce the carbon footprint, and being able to preserve resources. It's very important this is done in order that we can take the benefits we need and save the resources and be sustainable moving forward.
Wow, that so much said there. Completely agree. Can we just back up to this idea of like what you guys are doing in the laboratory that's kind of getting you the recycling benefit, and also actually maybe even before that, you just talked about a plastic that's made without plastic, basically, or the way that we think of it, right? A plastic made without carbon. So I mean, I think most people know, but just in case they don't know, can you just very briefly explain the relationship between oil and plastic, and then talk about this other alternative?
Yeah, effectively, plastics are made from the hydrocarbons that come from oil. So you take out the ethylenes and products, and then you turn those into the plastic products, and based upon the chemical reactions, they make different products, which we've been using for the 1960s. The first building block of that is oil and the carbons within oil, which is part of the problem. So we don't want to be burning these products. We don't want to be extracting them. So biopolymers are using different materials as the first building block. It may be a protein, it may be a starch, and then they work with that material to produce a different material which has the same properties as plastic or similar properties as plastics. We have things like PLAs, PHAs. All of these are abbreviations, and please don't make me say the full names of them because we need scientists for that. But they use a different building block to start. The other thing is our machines effectively alloy plastic. So we take a base plastic like a polyethylene, we put other materials in it so that you can get the properties you want. So simply, if you want a black plastic, you take a virgin plastic, you add black pigment to it, and you get a black plastic.
Bada bing, yep.
That's what our machines do. They can do the same with other materials as well, but the material you put in with the plastic can be sustainable as well. So we're making a lot of work now with byproducts of other industries. So we're working with outside deck board companies to put wood fiber back in. So where you've got wood fiber coming from wood mills and sawmills is being put back into a recycled plastic to make the boards for your decks outside. And there's a lot of opportunities for that, and a lot of opportunities for biopolymers. So, and again, these are developing markets. It's something new in the industry, and it's something that needs support and innovation. That's what we do in the lab. So it's a more complex material. It's harder to process, harder to make the things that you do. But if you work at it, you innovate, you can create something which is both has the benefits of the plastic-based material and also is a better environmental footprint.
Yeah, much better. Yeah. So actually, one of the things we didn't really talk about, so you guys don't actually make the plastics themselves. That's really not the business. No. And we didn't really touch on that. So why don't you touch on that?
Yeah, we don't make the plastics, our customers do. So we make the machines they use to modify the plastics to get the properties they want. And as I mentioned before, it could be quite simple, like changing the color of a plastic, but it could be something very beneficial. So in buildings now, whenever you've got materials, we may put things called flame retardants into the plastic. That means if there's a fire inside of the building, it it's not that it doesn't just burn, it slows down the pace of which the building would burn, and it makes sure that there's no gases that can cause problems coming out. It could be something similar to that. It may be, again, the old-fashioned favorite, you put something in of a lower cost in order to reduce the price of the materials. There's a full range of reasons for doing it. Our machines help the companies to do that. So we'll take the various ingredients, mix them together, and out the other end becomes the modified product or the alloy that you would use to then go into injection molding, film blowing, extrusion to make the final products that you're used to seeing in.
And so even though you make the machines that make the plastics, you're actually looking at the end product too. So you're actually innovating like a step beyond even where you guys are.
We're innovating a step beyond where we are. And then we're innovating a step beyond that as well. So that when the product's been finished, so again, when the product is finished in life, the question is how do you take it back and use that product again? And many times that means changing the form of the material. Okay, plastics are used, you put different materials in them, they are thrown in the trash, they get contaminated with paper, food, different things. So you've got to bring that material back, you've got to clean it, you've got to put it in a form that you can use it again, and then you've got to restart the process again through either mechanical recycling or chemical recycling. This enables the resources that were in that waste, today's waste, to become the raw materials of tomorrow's products.
Makes today's garbage tomorrow's base product.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
So doing all this work to recycle or help to reuse this stuff and really spending your hard-earned dollars on processes that are sort of after what you guys do and before, while admirable, I just wonder, how do you guys make that work economically? Like, how do you think about that from your role of properly allocating resources, for Farrel? How do you think about that?
It's really difficult. And again, it's an investment in the future. So we're convinced that the plastics industry will work its problems through. We're convinced that there'll be a good market for recycled plastics moving forward. And we're convinced that 10, 15, 20 years from now, recycling products at the end of their waste will be commonplace. Now in the US, around about 20% of plastics gets recycled, which is way too low. In the future, that won't be the case. It will be higher. Now, we're fairly confident of that. Can we see every step between now and that end result? No, we can't. But what we can do is we can start enabling and building out the products that allow that innovation to happen, which can try and produce it. But it's not easy, and we have to make a profit, and we have to pay the employees, and we have to be able to maintain our current business as well. Government projects like the IRA project helps. The government's project, the IRA project, where they're giving investment for green projects, sustainability. It's the Inflation Reduction Act, it's called. But it's actually targeted quite a lot towards sustainable businesses, and it allows our customers to get access to funds, which allows them to buy products from us that can facilitate the changeover to a new economy. So it's the same thing that facilitates changeover to using hydrogen, but these products can be used for capital expenditures, for recycling, and for promoting that, because it's going to cost billions of dollars to get the infrastructure right so that you can recycle plastics and you can work with plastics. And it's going to take a long time. And it's also got to satisfy the consumer, which means it's got to be cost effective. So by the time the consumer gets that product, it still needs to be in a cost bracket which is acceptable to the consumer. Right now,
one of the things, right, that plastic brought, which was it reduced the cost of just so many things.
I mean, that's what it did. I mean, it's a victim of its own success. I mean, it reduced the cost of so many things, which promoted a kind of throwaway culture of you use it and dispose of it. And then there was no real thought to what came after. I once saw a cartoon that was 1960s where they invented a plastic material and they said, this thing's going to last forever. And they're happy and jumping around. And then on the other side was students in 2022 saying this thing's going to last forever, and they're horrified. And it's that kind of thing. But it's really just getting to a position where you can use the resources and you can make them work. And it's not easy to do. And it's a very complex problem that needs work and compromise along the way. Over time, people will reduce consumption. We certainly won't be throwing away things like we were, but right now there's a challenge to recycling in the US because the cost of virgin materials, plastics, is reducing, which means the differential between the cost of a recycled product and a new product is very small, and people still would prefer a new product. I think people have to get used to the fact that if something's recycled, you would pay at least the same amount for it, maybe even a little bit more. And in the past, people haven't seen recycled materials like that. That needs a change in the consumer mindset to be able to see the value in those products and make sure it makes sense, because it is doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating, right? I don't know that everyone thinks about all those things, all the way through, right? We are where we are. We don't always remember where we came from. To your point, people that are all, people in their 20s that are all concerned about these plastics don't remember the world before plastics. It's really interesting.
No, I think that's the case. And again, when you've grown up with these solutions being in place, and you cannot remember what was there before plastics. And I think, again, now moving forward, we have to reimagine that, and we have to rethink it. Some of it's simple, some of it isn't. Just basic things, plastic straw versus a paper straw. Okay, the straws were all paper, and then they transitioned to plastics because, really? Paper is not a great material to make a straw from.
It's not.
It's not. Now, okay, when you dispose of paper, it's very easy to recycle, and it generally gets recycled. That isn't the case with the straws that you made. But if you're going to have a world where you have straws, then we need a material to make straws which is able to be done properly, to function properly, but most importantly, to be able to recaptured and reused again, so that it can be a resource that isn't lost to the outside. It's a resource that's captured and reused again, and also in doing that, you ensure that it doesn't become a waste problem, or it doesn't become something that creates a problem for somebody else. Why
do you think that the virgin, when you were talking about sort of the virgin plastic being less expensive or same price as the recycle, sort of in my mind reminded me of the issue with like falling gas prices? Like it's harder and harder to sell an EV that or maybe it's the other way around, easier and easier to sell an EV as gas prices go up and up, right? But if gas prices, as they have been, are coming way back down, all of a sudden the pain of like, oh, I have to plan my thing, I got to think about charging and all that stuff. When you're paying $5 a gallon, that's like an easier trade-off than when you're paying, $3 a gallon or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. And the unfortunate thing is virgin plastic materials like gas, the pricing is still driven by the market. It's driven by the supply and the demand in the market. And while that's the right thing to do, I think, again, it affects everything around it. So inversely, if you use more recycled materials, there's less demand for virgin materials. When there's less demand for virgin, it drives the price down. So it's the way the market works and the way that you can work around those.
It's like a negative reinforcement principle.
Negative thing. But what you really have to do is change the perception of what a recycled material is. I mean, ideally with a recycled material, you get exactly the same properties that you get with the virgin material, and you get a lower carbon footprint, and you don't use resources. So those are two value adds. So why doesn't it cost more for a recycled product than it does for a virgin product? It's a better product. This is still a transition I think many people are going through to get used to. But we need to be able to propagate the systems for recycled materials to get into the supply chain. Once we do that, I'm fairly confident that there'll be better systems for recycling. They'll reduce the costs. The capital expense of building those infrastructure is a big expense at first, but it will reduce over time. That then passes on down to the cost of the materials, and then hopefully there's an equilibrium effect without taking the raw materials, and we can get to a very viable product that meets the demand, meets the technical requirements, and is cost effective.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, there's also, which we won't get into, but there's the whole economic argument of whether or not the virgin materials actually capture their true cost, because there is the higher cost of like more garbage, more pollution and all that, which maybe isn't quite captured in the price of the raw, which, or to your way you've said it, was the benefit of the recycle. So
yeah,
it's an interesting market dynamic. So let's kind of pivot over to something you talked about before, which I think was super interesting, and I know you're really proud of it, maybe in part because it's touched near and dear to your life. But, the engineering development program that you guys have at Farrel, I'd love for you to talk about that. I think it's really, really interesting. And it sort of reminds me of that old adage, what was old is new again. And it sort of feels like we didn't do this for a long time for whatever the reasons. And now we're back to these programs. And it seems like it's really resonating with the young people of today.
Yeah, it is, and it's something we're incredibly proud of. It comes from the background we talked about a little bit before. In the past, we would have a business that was generally contracting or requiring less and less people. So the need to develop and train people was somewhat secondary. We had to do it, but generally, if somebody left the business, that was quite a nice thing because it was somebody you didn't have to exit from the business and move in that direction. And for a long period of time, this was the trajectory of the business. When we set about the new strategy and realized we were going to grow the business, we needed to find a way to get the resources that we would need to both maintain the levels we've got and also to allow us to start to grow. Going out and finding engineers on the open market is not easy to do. Going out and finding engineers with an experience of our products is even more difficult. Where we decided to do that work was to make our own. We made a commitment to build a new facility in Connecticut and stay in Connecticut. The reason for that is because the Northeast still has a fantastic education system. We work quite closely with UConn. We know there's a steady stream of very well-educated, very good engineers leaving not just UConn, lots of colleges around this area. So we had the raw materials. What we wanted to do was come up with a program which allowed them to come into our business, allowed them to develop, and allowed them to get to the position we needed them to be in, and also, equally as important, made sure they were still there at the end of the program and they didn't exit year 3 or 4 when we'd paid the money to educate, we'd paid the money to do the development work for us to lose them to other companies. We devised the engineering development plan, which is a very nice plan, which effectively brings the engineers to us normally via an internship, and then we acquire them directly from college. We onboard, and then we'll set out immediately as they're coming into the business what the next 5 years will look like for them. So this is what you can expect to learn. This is what you can expect to experience. These are the departments that you will work in. This is the level we expect you to be at. This is what we expect you to be able to do. This is the responsibility we want you to take. And equally, this is what your pay will look like. Assuming you hit these milestones, this is what your pay will look like as you progress through there. This we found to be incredibly successful with the engineers because they could see immediately their career path for the most difficult period, as in directly from college as they move through, put down in front of them where they had the confidence to do the work. They had the confidence to build from there and move forward. And again, for us, it's been a wonderful program. We've had now we've had more than a dozen engineers go through that program. We've retained almost all of them. One of them relocated to Florida. It was a family thing, but with the exception of that, it's been very successful. Most of the early entrants into that program have now not only become fully qualified engineers, they've gone on to management roles within the company and developed within the company. And it's really going to be the engine for our business moving forward.
Wow. That's so tremendous. I mean, difficult to get off the ground?
It was, because it's a long-term investment. So if you want to do something that you're going to benefit from 5 years from now, it is first of all, you're making investments early on, which takes some time. The second thing is there's a risk. If you get it wrong, then there's a problem. You don't find out for 5 years. We entrusted the group of engineers that we got on board with the future of the company. We were gambling that they had the talent, we had the capability to make them what we needed, and at the end of 5 years, we would both be in a position where we'd be successful moving forward. If we got that wrong, we didn't have a backup plan. So for us, it was very important. And again, lots of people work very hard to make sure that we transmit knowledge and to the people who come through the program. There's a wide range of people in the program. We have electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, polymer scientists, across a wide range from different schools. But the program's been really successful. And for me, to look back at something similar to what I was doing, and to see these people move through the business and be successful, and to even more than to see what they've got in front of them, and watch them make the next steps in their journey as well is incredibly rewarding, as it is for the people who pass their experience on to these people. So all in all, we've got the engineering resource. We were able to solve the problem. We've generated an engine for our business moving forward. We've all really enjoyed the path. So it's a success all the way around.
Yeah, it's a trifecta of victories right there. And so it sounds like it's not just a recruiting tool. It's not just a training and education tool, but it's also a succession planning tool, all in one.
Yes, absolutely. It's all in one. It's about recruitment. It's about retention. It's about succession, and even more than all of those things. Farrel for 175 years has been innovating products. We've been inventing things to solve problems moving forward. That's what we're investing in. These people will be inventing the solutions that are second nature to people 15, 20 years from now. We're building that foundation for them to do that. And again, it really is, it's a fantastic program to be around.
Wow, that's great. That's really cool. Well, I know I said we want to talk about it, so we'll end on the topic about sort of Farrel that's been a part of Connecticut and this manufacturing ecosystem technically for 175 years, as we've said.
Yes.
But it seems like in addition to sort of this, you know, the new leaf and the kind of engagement you've had in sort of plastics recycling and looking new ways to develop that market, not only have you sort of leaned into a new way of looking at developing and growing talent and succession planning, looks like you guys have also turned over a new leaf in terms of your participation and engagement with the manufacturing ecosystem overall.
Yes, we have, and again, it's the start of this journey for us, and again, we're very proud part of the ecosystem of Connecticut's manufacturing. We're very proud of our town of Ansonia, and the fact that Farrel's been in Ansonia for so long. We became very focused on our situation and very focused on the internals of our business, making sure that we were as good as we could be. And we were always mindful of our environment, always mindful of the community. We had a very good working relationship with Ansonia. We built a new facility there. They were very helpful with that. The mayor of Ansonia helped us a great deal. But we didn't really reach out so much beyond there. And we're facing challenges now that we haven't really faced before. We have the same challenges as everybody else, making sure we get the right people in the business, making sure that we're able to attract people, working in a way that we can get the resources we need to build the business moving forward. And we were pondering these problems, and over a period of time, 2 or 3 people said to us, hey, what you guys really need to do is speak to Paul Lloyd. Paul Lloyd can put you in contact with this ecosystem of Connecticut's manufacturers, with this ecosystem of resources, and you'll find this really beneficial. We started down that path, and again, we're now actively looking to reconnect. Paul made the recommendation to get in contact with yourself as well, do the Made of America podcast. I think it was his first or second recommendation. And we've been working there. We've had a lot of help from a lot of people. And again, we're starting that journey, but so far it's been very nice for us.
Yeah, we hear that all the time about sort of getting out there and just talking to other people that have been through some of the similar things, are currently going through the similar things. And one of the things that, I always remember growing up is like sort of 2 heads are better than 1, right? Type of an idea. If you can find other people that sort of have the same sort of foundation, that are trying to go in the same direction, tend to be able to get there more quickly and more successfully together than sort of not.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think the problems that businesses are facing today are more general problems than specific problems. And again, the easiest way to solve a problem is to talk to people, see what they've faced, see what solutions they've come up with, and seeing how you can help each other. The nice thing now is that people are prepared to do that. I think a few years ago, people would say, hey, I figured it out. You go figure it out yourself. Whereas now, I think that's the spirit that's really there, that's been generated in the ecosystem. And again, we found it to be very helpful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Paul, it's been awesome hearing your story in the story of Farrel Pomini. I'm going to kind of wrap up with some last questions and we'll put it to bed. Do you have a favorite business book?
Well, I read a lot of business books. It's not so much a favorite, but I pivoted a little bit. So I just finished reading Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, because as we deal with sustainable businesses, we're going more from dealing with huge conglomerate corporations to new startups and new businesses. So I'm trying to learn about those. So that's the last one that I read.
From 0 to 1. I hadn't heard about that one. That's really cool. Paul, if you had to do something other than be the president of Farrel Pomini, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, what would you do to spend your time?
That's a good question. I think I'm ruling out playing for Manchester United football team because I'm too old for that.
Well, I said anything could be. That could be the dream.
It could be that. But beyond that, I don't know what I would do. I think, again, building something. I think whatever it would be, I would be trying to build something.
Build something. If you could play for Man U, what position would you play?
Undoubtedly, it would be centre forward, because they really need some goals, and I can help them.
There you go. What's something, Paul, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
Trust the process. Work hard. I think, again, people get obsessed with having the prime job, with having the best opportunities, with having the most trust. I think the most important thing is to do the next thing in front of you as well as you can do it. And I think if you do the next thing in front of you as well as you can do it, the bigger thing will come along. People recognize that. Particularly now, I think it's a rare skill to find somebody who puts everything they've got into making sure that whatever it is they're tasked with is done to the best of their ability. And I think if you do that, then the opportunities will come. Then people recognize that. And I think it's the easiest skill for anybody to do, and it's the most underrated skill for anybody.
Dude, no question about that. I was in an interview recently, and when the person had the opportunity to ask a question, they said, well, after I get this job, what's the job I get after this one? I said, whoa, maybe get this one first and be successful at it.
Exactly.
So absolutely rare. That's super interesting. What's something, Paul, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Paul, and if young Paul would listen to you, it'd make a real positive impact on his life?
I think in career-wise, don't overthink things. I think, again, you have to, particularly if you go into the field of management, your job's about making decisions. Some decisions are very important. Some decisions are quite routine. You're expected to get the majority of decisions correct, but very few decisions actually can't be reversed or changed around. So it's important to make progress. You make a decision, don't second guess yourself. Don't spend your time worrying about that. Move forward and get to the right place. Always review, always be big enough to go back and say, I made a mistake, but don't beat yourself up about it, and make sure that you're always moving in the right direction towards the place where you want to go.
Always moving forward. Paul, thank you so much for coming on, sharing really, really interesting story and some great views. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.